keep counting the years like they are scars I can press with my thumb to prove they happened. Like if I touch them in the right order, I'll finally understand why I'm still here when so many better men aren't. And the worst part is how normal it feels now. How the ache has become a daily temperature inside my bones. Not a fire anymore, but a cold that never leaves. A cold that sits behind my ribs and watches everything I do. And I don't talk about it because talking is for people who believe they will be answered. For people who still expect a hand to reach back when they reach out. And I learned early that the world is a wall that only looks like a door if you keep bleeding against it long enough. I used to think pain was an event, a moment you survived, and then it became a story you told later with a hard smile and a clean shirt. But it's not an event, it's a residence. It's a room you live in until your name starts sounding like a stranger's in your own head. And I've lived in it so long that silence feels safer than hope. Because hope makes promises and silence doesn't. I know what it does to a man when his youth is spent on survival instead of building. When his strongest years are poured into things that give nothing back. When his body is a tool and his feelings are a liability. And then one day he notices the tool is dulling and he has no other way to be. Time didn't steal my youth like a thief in the night. It took it like a tax collector in daylight. Slow, legal, inevitable. And I paid because I didn't know how to refuse. I paid with my knees and my sleep and the softness I might have had if I'd been allowed to be more than useful. People think men age when their hair goes gray or their hands start to shake. But men age inside long before the outside tells the truth. They age when they realize nobody is coming. When the last person who might have protected them turns away or dies. When they stop expecting mercy and start building a personality out of endurance. I don't have memories the way other people do, warm and whole. Mine are fragments, a taste of iron, a certain look on a face right before it changes forever. The weight of something in my arms that used to be alive. And I carry those fragments like stones in my mouth, heavy, bitter. And I swallow them every day so no one has to see me spit blood. I have cried, yes, but never in a way that earned comfort, never loudly, never with permission. The tears come in private, and they taste like shame, because I was trained to believe that a man's grief is only acceptable when it becomes fuel. When it becomes action, when it becomes another reason to stand up and keep going, not when it becomes an honest collapse. You learn quickly that a man's collapse is not romantic. It is inconvenient, and inconvenient men get left behind. So I learned to keep moving with my face empty, with my throat tight. With my heart working like a bruised muscle that refuses to stop, because stopping would mean admitting how much it hurts to be alive this long, with so little to show for it, besides the ability to take more hits. There were years when hunger was my closest companion, closer than loyalty, closer than love, because hunger doesn't lie. It doesn't pretend to care and then vanish. It doesn't pat you on the back while it decides how to use you. It just sits there and reminds you what you are, an animal that needs. I remember being young enough to still believe in fairness, and I almost laugh at the innocence of that. The way I thought hard work and discipline were a kind of shield. Like if I stayed honorable, the world would recognize it and reward me. And I learned instead that honor is something you carry for yourself, not something the world pays for, and the world charges interest on it. I learned humiliation before I learned happiness, and that is not a metaphor. That is a curriculum. You don't learn strength from praise. Praise is a soft chair that makes you sleepy, and sleep in the wrong place gets you killed. You learn strength when you are treated like you are disposable, and you decide you will not be disposed of. You learn it when you are hungry, and you keep walking anyway. You learn it when you are commanded by men who haven't earned your respect, men who speak like their voice is the law, and you swallow your pride because pride doesn't stop blades. And later you realize swallowing pride is a kind of slow self-poisoning, and it changes you. I have watched men bend under ridicule, and I have watched men straighten under it. And the difference isn't virtue, it's stubbornness. It's the refusal to let another man's cruelty define the limits of your spine. I have been laughed at, doubted, ignored, ordered around, pushed forward into danger because someone else wanted to keep their hands clean. And I did it. Not because I wanted to be a hero, but because there are moments when obedience is the only shelter a man has. And you cling to shelter even when it humiliates you, because you want to live long enough to hate the humiliation properly. There is a special kind of loneliness that comes from being reliable, from being the one who doesn't complain, the one who can handle it, because people hear your silence and they assume it means you are fine, and then they build their comfort on your ability to swallow pain. You become a pillar, and pillars are not asked how they feel. You become a tool, and tools are not thanked until they break. And even then, the thanks is usually for the inconvenience of replacing you. That's what silence does. It becomes armor, and armor is respected, but it also seals you in. You start to believe your own hardness is your identity, and you forget there was ever anything else. And when the nights are quiet, when nobody is watching, and there is nothing to do but listen to your own thoughts, you realize the armor has fused to your skin, and taking it off would peel you open. I have lost battles in ways nobody writes songs about. Not the dramatic defeats where banners fall and speeches are made, but the small defeats that happen inside a man when he realizes he is being hollowed out, and he keeps going anyway because stopping would make the hollowness visible. I have watched plans rot. I have watched promises melt the moment they were tested. I have watched leaders speak about honor while they traded men's lives like coins. Betrayal isn't always a knife in the back. Sometimes it is a hand on your shoulder, guiding you forward, while the person behind you quietly closes the door. Emotional abandonment is not always loud either. It is often a gradual absence, a slow reduction of care, like you are being faded out of a picture. And one day you notice you are standing in the same room as someone who used to know you, and they look at you like you are just another piece of furniture. A man can survive a lot of physical pain, but that kind of disappearance eats something deeper. I have been left emotionally more times than I can count, not only by lovers or friends, but by the idea that my suffering meant anything to anyone. People will clap for a man's strength as long as it entertains them, as long as it makes them feel safe, as long as it doesn't ask them to change. And the moment your strength becomes a need instead of a spectacle, the crowd thins. I learned to stop reaching. I learned to stop asking. I learned to be the one who brings his own water, his own fire, his own reason to stand. That sounds admirable until you understand what it costs. It costs tenderness. It costs trust. It costs the part of you that would have rested if rest had ever been allowed. The mind keeps a ledger, even when you pretend it doesn't. Every time you swallow grief to keep moving, the ledger marks it. Every time you laugh when you want to scream, the ledger marks it. Every time you act unbothered while something inside you shatters, the ledger marks it. And then, years later, you wake up and you don't know why your chest feels heavy, even on days when nothing bad happens. And the answer is that nothing bad happening doesn't erase the debt. The debt is the man you became to survive the bad. Pain becomes discipline because discipline is the only thing that can carry pain without spilling it everywhere. You turn suffering into routine because routine is easier than mourning. You get up, you sharpen, you repair, you endure, and people call it resilience as if it is a gift, as if it came from good parenting or strong character. But they don't see how it was hammered into you by necessity, how the alternative was breaking and being trampled. I don't romanticize it. I don't speak about it like it made me noble. It made me functional. And being functional is not the same as being alive. There were men I buried in my head long before their bodies were buried in the ground. Because that's how you keep moving when the losses come too fast to honor properly. You tell yourself you will grieve later. You tell yourself you will remember them when you have time. Later becomes a myth, and time becomes a cruel joke. And the remembering happens in flashes that ambush you when you least deserve it, when you are trying to eat or wash or close your eyes. I have carried faces inside me like ghosts that don't need permission to enter. Some nights still hurts in a way that feels almost childish, like the pain belongs to a younger version of me who didn't understand what was coming. And I am forced to sit with him inside my own skull and listen to him ask questions I can't answer. Why them? Why not me? What was the point? What did we buy with all that suffering besides more suffering? I have no clean answers. Clean answers are for people who haven't seen the cost up close. The older I get, the more I understand that the world doesn't run on fairness. It runs on momentum and appetite and fear. And men like me are used as bricks in walls we will never live inside. People talk about sacrifice like it is holy, but sacrifice is often just what happens when someone with power decides your life is cheaper than their goals. I have been sacrificed, and I have watched others be sacrificed. And the most bitter lesson is that the world rarely remembers the names of the sacrificed. It remembers the winners. It remembers the loud. It remembers the ones who knew how to turn their survival into a story. I was never good at turning pain into performance. I was good at carrying it quietly. And quiet doesn't get statues. Quiet gets forgotten. There is a masculine pride in being unbreakable, but there is also a masculine tragedy in it, because you train yourself to endure, and then you realize you also trained everyone around you to expect your endurance, to rely on it, to exploit it without even meaning to. They don't ask if you are tired because you never taught them that you could be. You never taught them that your strength had a limit. You became the man who can take it, and that identity becomes a cage. I have felt my own tears rise, and I have swallowed them because I didn't want to be a burden. And I hate that word, burden, because it implies a man's pain is something shameful to share. But that's how we are raised, to treat our own needs like they are embarrassing, to treat our grief like it is a weakness that could be used against us. So I cried in silence and wiped my face with the back of my hand and went back to work like nothing happened. And every time I did that, I became a little more alone. People think loneliness is when you have no one. Real loneliness is when you have people, and you still can't show them the truth of you without risking your place among them. Real loneliness is being surrounded and still having to guard your chest like it holds something illegal. My body has been keeping score longer than my mind wanted to admit. It speaks now in aches that don't leave, in joints that argue with every step, in a fatigue that feels older than my age. There is a kind of exhaustion that sleep can't touch, because it isn't just a lack of rest, it is a weariness of being yourself. I feel it when I wake, before I even remember what day it is, a weight already waiting on my chest like it slept there overnight. I used to think strength was about force, about how hard you could hit, or how long you could run, or how much you could carry. Now I know strength is mostly about patience, about how many times you can do the right thing while feeling nothing but emptiness inside, how many times you can stand up without applause, how many times you can keep your word when keeping it costs you. That is not the kind of strength anyone celebrates. They celebrate the bright strength, the loud strength, the victory strength. They don't celebrate the strength of a man who gets up because not getting up would mean letting the past win. They don't celebrate the strength of a man who keeps his anger on a leash because he knows what his anger could do if it ran free. They don't celebrate the strength of a man who has learned to swallow his pride without swallowing his dignity. I've had to learn that difference the hard way, because pride wants to be seen, and dignity wants to be intact, and those two don't always travel together. There were times I let pride steer me into ugliness, times I mistook hardness for virtue, times I thought being cold made me safe. Cold doesn't make you safe. Cold just makes you less human, and the world already has enough of that. But I can't pretend I haven't needed it. There are places a man goes where softness is a death wish. There are seasons where compassion is a luxury, where the only thing that matters is keeping your spine straight and your hands steady. Men don't learn endurance in a classroom. We learn it in moments where quitting would feel like dying, and we pick the smaller death and call it discipline. We build our identity out of what we survive because we can't afford to build it out of what we enjoy. Enjoyment is fragile. Survival is dependable. That's why men like me don't know what to do with peace when it finally appears. We don't know how to sit without scanning, how to breathe without bracing. Even in quiet, my mind listens for impact. Even in stillness, my hands remember tension. Peace feels suspicious, like a trap, because pain has been the most consistent thing in my life. Pain never forgot me. Pain never went away. Pain kept showing up on time, and that reliability becomes a twisted comfort. At least pain is honest. I think about the years when I could have been someone else, if I had been allowed to be. If I had been loved without conditions. If I had been held without being measured. If I had been taught that my value wasn't only in what I could withstand. But wishes like that are dangerous, because they make you resent the life you actually have, and resentment is heavy. Still, I can't deny it. Time stole my options while I was busy surviving. Other men were learning how to build homes, how to raise children with laughter in their voices, how to make mistakes and be forgiven, how to dream without feeling foolish. I was learning how to endure hunger, how to sleep in scraps, how to keep my face neutral when a man in authority tried to break my spirit for sport. I was learning how to accept abandonment as normal. I was learning how to carry grief without dropping it. And people will look at me now and call me strong. And I want to ask them what they think that word means. Because strength built this way is not a gift. It is a scar pattern. It is what happens when you are denied softness until you forget how to ask for it. The praise comes late, if it comes at all. And late respect is a strange thing. It doesn't heal. It doesn't restore. It only proves that people noticed you after you were already used up. Sometimes the respect comes when you're no longer capable of enjoying it. When your body is tired and your mind is crowded with ghosts, and you stand there being honored, and you feel nothing but a distant bitterness because you remember the years when respect would have been a rope instead of a ribbon. I have been treated like an outsider in rooms where my sweat paid for the walls. I have been dismissed by men who wouldn't last a week in the life I've carried. I have watched people choose comfort over truth, popularity over loyalty, convenience over honor. And I have watched myself do it too, because I am not clean. I am not a pure victim. I have made compromises that still sit in my throat. I have followed orders that I hated. I have stayed quiet when I should have spoken, because speaking would have cost me. Men don't always betray with grand gestures. Sometimes we betray by remaining silent to protect our own skin. I hate that part of me, the part that learned cowardice as a survival skill. But I also understand it, because survival teaches you ugly lessons and calls them wisdom. It teaches you that being right doesn't keep you alive. It teaches you that sometimes the best you can do is stay standing and hope you can live with yourself later. Living with yourself later is the hardest part. The battles don't end when the fighting ends. They end when you stop waking up at night, feeling your heart race for reasons you can't explain. They end when you can look at your own reflection and not feel contempt. They end when you can forgive the man you were when he had no good choices. I'm not there. I don't know if I'll ever be there. The grief I carry isn't only for the dead. It's for the living parts of me that were starved. It's for the laughter I never learned how to keep. It's for the tenderness I kept locked away until the key rusted. It's for the people I could have loved better if I hadn't been trained to treat love like a weakness. I have had affection offered to me, and I didn't know how to receive it without suspicion. I have had kindness in front of me, and I couldn't relax into it because I kept waiting for the price. That's what a lifetime of betrayal does. It teaches you that every hand is either taking or testing. When you live that way long enough, you become difficult to love, because love requires a kind of openness that feels like stepping into the path of a blade. People tell men to open up as if it's a switch, as if the years of being punished for honesty can be reversed with a sentence. They don't understand the cost. They don't understand that a man who has survived by being closed isn't stubborn. He's trained. He's conditioned. He's built himself into something that can endure abandonment. And opening up feels like dismantling the only shelter he trusts. I have sat across from people who said they cared, and my throat refused to move. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I had too much, and I knew that once I started, there would be no neat way to stop. The truth isn't tidy. The truth is heavy, and it spills. So I keep it inside, and inside it grows weight. Some nights I feel it press against my ribs like it's trying to escape. Some nights I have to get up and walk just to bleed the pressure off, to remind myself that my legs still work, that I can still move, that I'm not trapped. I've met men who talk about their pain like it makes them interesting. That's not me. My pain doesn't make me interesting. It makes me tired. It makes me short with people who complain about small things because I can't help comparing. And that comparison is a poison, because everyone's suffering feels large to them. And my bitterness doesn't make me wise. It just makes me lonely. I don't want to be the man who judges other people's pain. I don't want to be that hardened. But hardness accumulates. It's like dust in a room you never open. You can pretend it isn't there until the light hits it. I have lived through defeats that taught me not to expect rescue. I have lived through hunger that taught me not to waste. I have lived through humiliation that taught me to keep my face still. I have lived through emotional abandonment that taught me not to ask for too much. I have lived through silence so long that when I try to speak honestly, the words feel foreign. This is what survival does. It saves you, and it distorts you at the same time. It keeps you breathing while it steals your ability to enjoy breathing. There is rage in me that I keep under control, not because I'm gentle, but because I know what rage can do when it is given permission. Rage makes men feel powerful for a moment, and then it leaves them standing in the wreckage of what they destroyed. I have destroyed enough. I have watched rage ruin good men, and I have felt it tug at me like a chain, and I learned to use it differently. I don't use it to explode. I use it to refuse. Refusal is a quieter kind of violence. It is the violence of standing up when your body begs you to stay down. It is the violence of continuing when nobody is watching, when nobody will clap, when nobody even knows what you are surviving. That is the kind of motivation I understand. Not comfort, not inspirational words. Comfort is for people who still believe the world cares. I don't. I believe the world will take what it can and move on. So I stand out of pride, out of stubbornness, out of spite sometimes, because collapsing would feel like giving the world permission to say it was right about me, that I was only a tool, and now the tool is broken. I won't give it that satisfaction. I won't become a cautionary tale told by people who never carried what I carried. I won't let my ending be someone else's moral lesson. That doesn't mean I'm hopeful. Hope is a fragile thing that I don't trust. What I have is a refusal to kneel. What I have is a habit of getting up. What I have is discipline built out of pain, because pain was my teacher, and it never missed a lesson. I've learned that men often become men through humiliation, through being shown their smallness and surviving it, through being laughed at and not quitting, through being lonely and not turning that loneliness into cruelty. That last part is the hardest, because loneliness wants company, and if it can't get love, it will accept control. And if it can't get control, it will accept destruction. I've had to fight that inside me. I've had to decide again and again not to become the kind of man who spreads his pain like infection. But I won't pretend I'm clean. There are days when I am cold. There are days when I look at kindness and feel anger because I didn't get it when I needed it most. There are days when I want the world to feel the weight it placed on me. That is an ugly desire, and it lives in many men who pretend it doesn't. We are taught to be noble in our suffering, as if suffering is only respectable when it is silent and graceful. My suffering hasn't been graceful. It has been stubborn. It has been gritty. It has been full of thoughts I would never say out loud. It has been full of small hates and hard decisions and private tears. I don't romanticize the warrior inside me. That warrior is a tired animal that learned to bite because nobody fed him. He kept moving because stopping meant dying. And now he keeps moving because stopping would mean facing everything he avoided by moving. Movement has been my prayer. Movement has been my avoidance. Movement has been my identity. And the idea of stillness scares me more than battle ever did. Because stillness makes room for memory, and memory is where the dead speak. I've watched respect arrive too late, and I've watched it not arrive at all. And I've had to learn not to build my worth on other people's timing. That is a hard lesson, because men are starved for recognition in ways we don't admit. We pretend we don't need it. We mock men who ask for it. We call them weak. But the truth is that a man who is never seen starts to question whether he exists beyond his usefulness. I've lived years where the only proof I had that I mattered was that someone needed me to carry something heavy. And when the carrying stopped, when the task was done, the attention disappeared, and I was left with the echo of my own footsteps. People talk about legacy like it is a comfort. Legacy is what people say when they want you to die quietly. They tell you it will mean something later because they don't want to deal with what it means now. Later doesn't help you when your hands are shaking and your chest is tight and your mind is full of faces you couldn't save. Later doesn't sit with you in the dark. Later doesn't wipe the sweat off your brow after a nightmare. Later doesn't hold your head when you finally let a tear slip because your body can't keep the pressure inside anymore. I have had nights where I sat alone and felt something in me crack. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet fracture, like ice splitting under weight. And I listened to myself breathe and realized I was still alive. And for a moment, I didn't know whether to be grateful or angry. There is a kind of anger at survival that nobody talks about because it sounds ungrateful, but it's real. When you live too long inside pain, you start to wonder what kind of joke it is that you survived all that, only to carry it forever. Survival is not always a victory. Sometimes it is a sentence. Sometimes it is being forced to keep walking with a burden that will never be set down. I have earned my survival with blood and discipline and humiliation, and I still wake up with the weight. That is the brutal truth. The body heals in its imperfect way. The mind adapts in its twisted way. The soul, if there is such a thing, just gets heavier. And still, I get up. I don't get up because I believe it will get better. I get up because I refuse to lie down in front of the same world that tried to break me. I get up because pride is sometimes the only oxygen a man has. I get up because collapsing feels like surrender, and surrender feels like betrayal of the men who didn't get to stand up again. I carry them with me in that refusal. I carry them in my discipline. I carry them in the way I hold my face steady, even when something inside me is screaming. The world never gave us softness. The world never gave us time. So we gave ourselves endurance. And endurance is a hard kind of faith. It is believing in nothing and continuing anyway. I don't trust happiness the way I trust endurance. Happiness feels like a visitor that can leave without warning. Endurance feels like a tool I can keep sharpening even when my hands are numb. Men like me learn endurance before happiness because happiness requires safety, and safety was never guaranteed. We learn to read danger before we learn to read joy. We learn to keep our voices level before we learn to laugh freely. We learn to carry pain like a pack before we learn to carry love. And when love comes, if it comes, we treat it like it is fragile because we know how easily things break. That sounds gentle, but it isn't always. Sometimes we treat love like a hostage. Sometimes we keep it at a distance to protect it, and in doing that we starve it. I have done that. I have kept people at arm's length and told myself it was for their good, when really it was for mine. Because closeness makes the knife cuts deeper when it comes, and the knife always comes in some form. I have been betrayed by friends, and I have been disappointed by leaders, and I have been abandoned by people who said they would stay. And after enough of that, you stop building your house near anyone else's promises. You build it on your own back. But a house built on your own back is heavy, and it bends you over time. That's what I feel now, this bend. It's not only in my posture, it's in my spirit. It's in the way my thoughts lean toward worst case, toward caution, toward the expectation of loss. I wish I could say I grew wiser, that I became calmer, that the years gave me peace. The years gave me realism. Realism is not peace. Realism is looking at your life and seeing exactly what you paid and exactly what you didn't receive, and deciding anyway to keep your dignity intact. That is the only thing I can still control. Dignity is not pride. Pride wants admiration. Dignity wants self-respect. Dignity is how I keep from becoming a monster. Dignity is how I keep my hands from taking what I could take just because I can. I have had chances to be cruel, and I have wanted it. I have wanted to make the world feel a fraction of what it gave me. But I didn't, not because I'm holy, but because cruelty leaves you emptier, and I'm already too empty in places. I have watched men who let their bitterness drive and they become walking wounds, bleeding on everyone. And I understand them. I do. But I don't want that to be my legacy, if I have one. I want my suffering to end with me as much as possible. That is a strange kind of love. The love of a tired man who doesn't want to spread the poison. And still, even with that intention, I know I have hurt people by being closed, by being absent even when I was physically present, by being so focused on survival that I forgot how to nurture. That guilt is another weight, quiet and constant. It doesn't scream, it just sits. And when I think about all the years spent fighting, all the nights spent hungry, all the humiliations swallowed, all the betrayals endured, I realize the hardest battle was never against an enemy outside. The hardest battle has always been against the part of me that wants to give up, the part that wants to stop caring, the part that whispers that none of it mattered. I fight that part every day. I fight it without witnesses. I fight it without medals. I fight it with clenched teeth and a steady face. That's what it means to live too long inside pain. You become your own battlefield, and there is no armistice, only the next morning. There are mornings when I look at my hands and I don't recognize them as mine. Not because they changed, but because they have done things my younger self couldn't imagine surviving. And that younger self still lives somewhere in me, still flinching, still hoping, still naive enough to think that suffering must lead to something. I want to tell him the truth. The truth is that suffering forges identity, because identity is what you grab when everything else is taken. And men like me don't get to be defined by our dreams. We get defined by what we endure. That sounds grim, because it is. But it is also honest. When the world strips you down, what remains becomes you. That's why men who have suffered carry a certain weight in their eyes. It's not mystery, it's memory, it's cost. It's the awareness that life is not fair and that you can still choose not to be weak. Weakness isn't crying. Weakness is letting your pain turn you into someone you would hate if you met him in a different body. I have cried. I have shaken. I have felt fear so sharp it made my stomach turn. And I still went forward, because fear is not a reason to stop. It's a signal to tighten your grip. People misunderstand that. They think courage is not feeling fear. Courage is feeling it and moving anyway. I've done that so many times that it became a habit. Habits don't feel heroic. They feel like chores. That's what survival becomes. A chore you do every day, even when you don't want to. Even when you're tired of being strong. Even when you're tired of being the one who endures. I don't have a clean ending inside me. I don't have a lesson that wraps this up. I have a life that kept demanding hardness, and I gave it hardness. And now I am old enough to see what that trade cost. It cost my softness. It cost my ease. It cost my ability to be cared for without suspicion. It cost my ability to rest without guilt. And still, I can't pretend I would choose differently if the same doors were closed and the same hunger was waiting. Because survival makes choices for you and then calls you the author. I am not proud of everything I've done, but I am proud of the fact that I did not collapse in the places where collapse would have meant becoming nothing. That is my dark motivation, my unforgiving fuel. I will not be nothing. I will not be erased while I'm still breathing. I will not let the pain write the last word as if it owns me. Pain shaped me, yes. Disciplined me, yes. Made me hard, yes. But it doesn't get to take my last inch of dignity. So I keep moving with this tired body, with this scarred mind, with this heavy soul. And I speak to myself in the only language I trust, the language of refusal, the language of controlled tears and clenched jaw, the language of a man who has been alone too many times to expect comfort, but not so broken that he'll lie down and stay there. Not yet. Not while there is still breath in me, and a small, stubborn part of my spirit that would rather bleed than beg, that would rather carry the weight than hand it to someone who wouldn't understand, that would rather stand in the dark with no witnesses than be seen only when it's convenient. And if that sounds like pride, it is. But it is also survival. And survival is the only truth that never betrayed me, the only companion that stayed, the only vow I've kept without fail, even when my hands tremble and my eyes burn and my chest feels like it's full of stones, and the night stretches long and quiet, and all I can hear is the old grief pacing inside me, waiting for the moment I finally stop moving long enough for it to sit beside me and remind me of every face, every loss, every year that slipped through my fingers while I was busy being strong. And still, when morning comes, it doesn't come like mercy. It comes like duty, like the next weight thrown onto an already loaded back. And I've learned to meet it without expecting anything from it except the chance to not be finished yet. Because that's what my life has turned into. A long argument with the idea of ending. Not a dramatic argument, not a loud one. Just a quiet daily refusal that sits under everything I do like a clenched fist in my pocket. People think the worst part of a warrior's life is the fighting. But fighting is simple compared to living afterward. Because in the fight, you know what you are. You know what you're for. You know what matters in that narrow moment. And after, you're just a man with a body that remembers too much, and a mind that won't stop scanning for threats that no longer have names. I've walked into rooms where people laughed and talked and complained about soft things, and I could feel how different I was without saying a word, like I was made of another material, and they could sense it too. Not with their minds, maybe, but with whatever part of them still recognizes danger and grief as a smell. They'll call you intense. They'll call you quiet. They'll call you strong, and they'll say it like a compliment. But what they mean is you make them uncomfortable because you don't play the same game anymore. Because your face doesn't move the way theirs does when something is funny. Because you don't waste energy pretending you're fine, even when you're acting fine. They don't know what it is to carry your own history like a loaded pack. To be haunted by the exact second something went wrong and you couldn't stop it. To be weighed down not only by what you did, but by what you couldn't do. Because that's the real poison. The helplessness that comes wrapped inside responsibility. Men like me don't get to be innocent. Innocence is a luxury that gets burned off early. We become men in the furnace, and then the world wants us to step back into ordinary life like the furnace never happened, like we didn't leave pieces of ourselves in there, like we can just wash our hands and become light again. I can't. I can perform normal. I can nod at the right times. I can keep my voice level and my answers short and my eyes calm. But inside it's still the same old machine, the same mental grindstone, turning and turning, sharpening every thought into something useful, because usefulness is the only value I was allowed to trust. I don't know how to be useless without feeling worthless. I don't know how to sit still without feeling like I'm stealing time from the work of surviving. Even when nobody is asking me for anything, I feel like I'm late, like I'm behind, like there's a debt I haven't paid yet. That's what years of being needed does to a man. It makes him addicted to being required, because being required is proof you're still alive in someone's mind. When you stop being required, you start hearing the silence louder, and the silence is where all the losses live. The silence isn't empty for me. It is crowded. It is full of voices I don't want to hear but can't shut out. Full of moments that never got to end cleanly. Full of names that still make my throat tighten, because saying them feels like opening a wound that never actually closed. I've watched men talk about closure like it's a door you can shut. There is no closure. There is only the decision to keep walking while the door stays open behind you, letting cold air into your spine. You carry the cold. You get used to it. You stop telling people you're cold because you know they'll say, "Put on a jacket," and you'll realize they have no idea that the cold is inside your bones, not on your skin. I've noticed how men age when their bodies are still capable, but their spirit is already tired. How they keep the same shape on the outside, while on the inside, something is thinning, not even breaking, just thinning, like a rope fraying one fiber at a time. That's what time does when you spend it fighting and not living. It doesn't just take years, it takes texture, it takes color, it takes curiosity. Curiosity is the first thing to die in a man who has seen too much, because curiosity opens doors, and doors lead to pain. And once you've been punished for wanting to know, you start choosing ignorance as a form of peace. I don't ask about people's lives anymore unless they ask me first. I don't dig. I don't pry. I learned that knowing someone means eventually watching them leave, one way or another. And the older I get, the less I want to add new names to the list of things I'll have to grieve. That sounds harsh. It is harsh, but it's also self-defense. People talk about walls like they are a flaw. Walls are what keep you from bleeding out. A man doesn't build walls because he hates love. He builds them because he learned what happens when he lets love in without armor. I've been used. I've been lied to. I've been treated like a weapon someone could borrow and then put back on the shelf. And the worst part is that for a long time I accepted it, because being used felt like being valued. Because at least when someone used me, they noticed me. That's a sick kind of hunger, and it took me years to admit I had it. There's a shame in needing, especially as a man, because need is treated like weakness. And weakness is treated like permission for the world to step on you. So you hide your need. You become the man who needs nothing, and everyone applauds. And meanwhile, you are starving in places nobody can see. I've starved in places nobody can see for so long that sometimes I don't even know what the hunger is for anymore. Not food. Not sleep. Something else. Something like being held without being evaluated. Something like being allowed to be tired without being judged. Something like being understood without having to translate your pain into a story people can digest. People don't like raw pain. Raw pain makes them feel helpless. And helplessness scares them, so they try to fix it, or they try to distance themselves from it. And either way, you learn not to show it. You learn to speak in safe phrases, in jokes, in small complaints that don't reveal the real wound. The real wound stays buried, and buried wounds don't heal. They just turn into something hard, something you bump into from the inside every time you try to breathe deep. I've lived with the knowledge that nobody truly knows my hell, because I never gave them a map. And sometimes that feels like a victory, like I kept my dignity intact. And sometimes it feels like the loneliest mistake I ever made. Men brag about how they carried everything alone, and I understand that pride. I understand that stubborn satisfaction. But there is a hidden cost. When you carry everything alone long enough, you forget how to set anything down, even when you're allowed. You don't trust the ground to hold it. You don't trust other hands. You don't trust yourself to be without the weight, because the weight is what kept you moving. Without it, who are you? That question is a blade. Most men avoid it until it's too late. I've been forced to face it in small ways. In the moments when my body refuses a command it used to obey. When my arms shake under loads that would have been easy once. When my breath shortens sooner than it should. Aging is humiliating to a man who built his identity on capability. It feels like betrayal from your own flesh. And because men are trained to accept humiliation from the world, but not from themselves, we take it personally. We become angry at our own weakness. We start punishing ourselves for what time is doing naturally. I've done that. I've woken up and felt slow and hated myself for it, as if hatred could reverse the years, as if contempt could strengthen bone. But contempt is what I was fed for so long. Contempt from others, and then contempt learned inside, and it becomes a reflex. It becomes the voice that says, you should be tougher, you should be better, you should stop feeling anything, you should stop needing anything, you should stop wishing for what you never got. That voice never helps. It only hardens you further. But I keep it because it's familiar, because it's the same voice that pushed me through nights when giving up would have been easy. It's a cruel coach, and sometimes cruelty is what kept me alive. That is another bitter truth. The kindness I give myself now is limited because the kindness I received back then was rare, and a man can only give what he has learned to recognize. I've had to teach myself mercy like it was a foreign language, and I'm still clumsy with it. Sometimes the best I can do is not punish myself more. Sometimes the best I can do is let myself sit in the fatigue without turning it into self-hatred. That feels like weakness to the part of me that was forged in scarcity. But maybe it's not weakness. Maybe it's just the late education of a man who never got to be gentle with himself because nobody was gentle with him first. I used to think being strong meant being fearless, being relentless, being hard enough that nothing could touch you. Now I know being strong is being touched and still choosing not to rot into bitterness. It's being wounded and still refusing to become the wound. That is harder than any fight, because fights end, bitter lives don't. And I've seen bitter old men. I've seen what happens when a man carries humiliation and defeat and abandonment and never processes it, never speaks it, never turns it into anything except contempt. He becomes a shadow that bites. He becomes the kind of man who makes a room colder when he enters. He becomes a warning. I've stood near that edge more times than I want to admit. There were nights when I felt myself slipping toward that kind of hardness, when I wanted to stop caring entirely, when I wanted to make my heart into stone, because stone doesn't break. But stone also doesn't feel. Stone doesn't remember love. Stone doesn't experience anything except pressure. I don't want to live like a stone, but I also don't want to live like an open wound. So I stay in between, half armored, half exposed, carrying this constant internal argument about what kind of man I'm allowed to be after everything. Men are not given space to be complicated. We are told to be strong or weak, useful or useless, respectable or shameful. Nobody teaches you how to be a man who is both proud and grieving, both hard and tired, both disciplined and hurting. Nobody teaches you how to carry contradictions without splitting. I've had to learn it alone, in the quiet, in the parts of the night where the mind starts telling the truth because there's no audience to impress. That's when I admit the worst thing. Sometimes, I don't miss people the way I miss the version of myself that existed before I lost them. Sometimes, my grief is not only for them, but for the man I was when the world was still wide, when I still believed in more than endurance. That man is dead in a way that can't be mourned publicly, because you can't hold a funeral for your own lost innocence. You just carry it. You carry it, and you pretend it doesn't matter. But it matters. It matters because it changes how you look at everything. It changes how you love. It changes how you trust. It changes how you hope. And hope is the most dangerous thing for a man like me. Because hope is the thing that made my losses hurt the most. If I had expected nothing, the betrayal wouldn't have cut as deep. If I had expected nothing, the abandonment wouldn't have hollowed me out. So part of me learned to kill hope early, to starve it, to treat it like a weakness that would get me killed. But killing hope also kills joy. And a life without joy is not heroic. It's just long. There's a strange cruelty in living long enough to see the world change around you, while you stay the same shape inside. People's values shift. They start calling things strength that would have gotten you punished in your youth. They start talking about feelings and healing and vulnerability. And some of it is real and needed, and some of it is performance. And either way, it doesn't erase the training you got. It doesn't erase the years when vulnerability was punished, when speaking honestly was used against you, when showing pain made you a target. I can listen to a man talk about mental health like it's simple, and I want to respect the progress. But I also want to grab him by the collar and ask him if he's ever been in a place where honesty costs you safety. Not social safety, physical safety, survival safety. There are different kinds of truth, and the world only celebrates the kind of truth that doesn't make it uncomfortable. It celebrates the kind of vulnerability that is packaged, that is controlled, that ends with a lesson. It doesn't celebrate the kind of vulnerability that is raw and unresolved and heavy. That kind of vulnerability gets you avoided. I know, because I've tried to show it a few times. Carefully, like offering a wild animal a hand. And I watched people flinch, watched their eyes change, watched them start calculating how to get out of the room. I don't blame them. Most people aren't built to carry someone else's darkness. Most people are trying to outrun their own. But it taught me again what I already knew. You survive alone, even when you are surrounded. You do your worst carrying alone. You learn to smile anyway. You learn to make yourself smaller. You learn to be pleasant so nobody suspects how heavy your chest is. Men become experts at hiding because we are rewarded for it. We are praised for holding it together, as if it's a moral virtue and not a coping mechanism. Holding it together becomes a habit, and habits outlive their usefulness. You can hold it together so long that you forget what it would feel like to let it fall apart in a safe place. And then one day you realize you don't even know what safe means anymore, because you built your whole identity around not needing safety. That's another quiet theft time commits. It doesn't only take your strength, it takes your ability to accept care. I think about the men who did complain, the men who did speak, the men who asked for help, and how often they were mocked, dismissed, told to toughen up, told they were weak, told they were ruining morale. I watched that happen, and I learned my lesson. I learned that silence keeps you employed, keeps you respected, keeps you included. Silence becomes a currency. You pay for acceptance with your own voice. Then, years later, people wonder why men don't talk. They wonder why men break in private. They wonder why men disappear into work, into anger, into addictions, into solitude. It's not a mystery. It's training. It's cause and effect. If a man is punished for honesty enough times, he stops being honest. He becomes strategic. He becomes careful. He becomes a man who only shows what is safe to show. And then people say he is distant. They say he is emotionally unavailable. They don't ask what made him that way. They don't ask what happened the first time he tried to speak and got laughed at. They don't ask what happened the first time he cried and someone used it against him. They don't ask what happened the first time he admitted fear and got abandoned. So I stopped talking. I became the man who could take it. I became the man who kept his mouth shut. And I paid. I paid with insomnia, with tension that never left my shoulders, with a jaw that aches from being clenched so often, with a mind that refuses to rest because rest feels like negligence. You think you can outwork pain. You can't. Pain doesn't get tired. Pain waits. Pain is patient. Pain is loyal in its own ugly way. It will sit behind your eyes for decades and then show up when you finally slow down, when you finally have a quiet life, when you finally have a bed and a roof and food, and it will demand its attention like a debt collector knocking at your door when you thought you were finished paying. And you are never finished paying. That's the thing. People tell you time heals, time covers, time dulls. Time teaches you to live around the wound, but it doesn't erase the wound. Some nights it still hurts because the wound is still there, because the body remembers, because the mind remembers, because the soul, if you want to call it that, remembers. The hurt changes shape, that's all. It becomes less sharp sometimes and more heavy. It becomes a weight you carry instead of a blade you can't pull out. But it is still weight, and weight still bends you. And I won't pretend I didn't become addicted to the identity of suffering. That's a hard truth to say, but it's real. When you've lived too long inside pain, pain becomes a reference point. You judge everything against it. You trust it more than comfort. You feel suspicious when life is quiet because quiet feels like the moment before impact. You feel guilty when you enjoy something because enjoyment feels like stealing from the dead, like betraying the seriousness of what you've lived. I've felt that guilt. I've sat in a moment that should have been good and found myself scanning my own mind for the price, waiting for something bad to balance it out. That's not wisdom. That's damage. But damage is what I have, and I can either lie about it or carry it honestly. Carrying it honestly means admitting that sometimes I choose hardship even when I don't have to, because hardship feels familiar. Familiar feels safe. Safe is not always good. Safe is just predictable. I've done things the hard way just to prove I still could. I've refused help out of pride. I've pushed people away out of fear. I've said I'm fine when I was not fine, not because I wanted to deceive, but because I'm fine is what a man says when he doesn't have the energy to open the whole coffin of his truth. That's what it feels like, a coffin. You open it and everything you buried comes rushing out, and you have to handle it, and handling it takes strength you don't have left. So you keep it closed, you keep it sealed, you keep moving. That's not cowardice, that's triage. Men like me become experts at triage. We learn what can be ignored and what will kill us if we ignore it. We learn to compartmentalize because if we don't, we drown. But compartmentalizing is not the same as healing. Compartmentalizing is building small rooms inside your head and locking pain inside them. Those rooms fill up over time. One day the doors start rattling. One day the locks start failing. That's when you see old men suddenly break, suddenly become angry for no reason, suddenly become silent in a way that scares their families. It's not sudden, it's decades. It's the rooms finally overflowing. I can feel those rooms in me. I can feel the doors. I can hear the hinges. And it makes me careful. It makes me watch myself. It makes me disciplined in a new way. Not disciplined in battle, but disciplined in my own mind, making sure the darkness doesn't leak out onto the wrong people, making sure the bitterness doesn't become my only voice. That discipline is exhausting too because it is constant. There is no day off from being yourself. There is no rest from your own history. So when someone asks me how I did it, how I survived, how I kept going, I don't give them an answer that makes them feel good. I don't tell them it was faith or inspiration or a dream. It was rage sometimes. It was spite sometimes. It was pride more often than I like to admit. It was the simple refusal to be the man who collapses and stays down. It was the knowledge that nobody would save me, so saving myself was the only option. It was the belief that if I quit, all the suffering would become meaningless, and I couldn't accept that. Not because I think meaning is guaranteed, but because I needed a reason to keep breathing. Men will invent meaning when none is given, because meaning is fuel. We can run on pain for a while, but pain burns fast. Meaning burns slower. And my meaning was not pretty. My meaning was survival. My meaning was not letting the world win. My meaning was not letting betrayal be the final word. My meaning was carrying what I had to carry, because dropping it would have crushed someone else. That's another thing people don't say. Men endure not only for themselves, but because they are afraid of what will happen if they stop. We are often the last wall between chaos and the people we love. And even if those people don't see it, even if they don't thank us, the wall stands because it knows what it is holding back. I've been that wall. I've felt the pressure. I've watched cracks form and still held. And when you've lived as a wall long enough, you forget you're allowed to be a man. You forget you're allowed to want. You forget you're allowed to need. You forget you're allowed to be held. All you know is holding. All you know is resisting. That's why the nights still hurt. Not only because of what happened, but because of what it turned me into. Because of the way it trained me to live like a fortress, even when the war is quiet. Because of the way it made me feel ashamed of my own tears. Because of the way it convinced me that comfort is something other people deserve, and I should just be grateful for the ability to endure. Because gratitude is easier than admitting you were robbed. I was robbed. Not by one man, not by one betrayal, not by one war. By the accumulation, by the years, by the way time kept moving while I stood in fire. By the way youth passed like a stranger while I was busy being strong. And I'm still standing, yes, but standing isn't the same as living. And I know that difference now in a way I didn't when I was young. And knowing it doesn't give me peace. It gives me a sharper hunger, not for comfort, not for hope, but for something like truth, something like being able to look at myself without flinching, something like being able to carry my own pain without pretending it made me noble, something like being able to admit that I am tired and still refuse to collapse, because that is the only kind of motivation that ever belonged to me, the dark, unforgiving kind, the kind that doesn't promise a reward, the kind that doesn't ask to be understood, the kind that just keeps going, one more step, one more breath, not because it believes in a happy ending, but because it refuses to let the suffering be the only story. Refuses to let the nights take everything. Refuses to let the world have the satisfaction of seeing the warrior finally beg for softness when softness was never offered. And if that sounds cruel, it is. But it is my cruelty, directed inward like a blade I keep sheathed until I need it. Because there are still nights when the grief rises like floodwater, and I have to stand inside it without drowning. Still nights when the old faces come back, and I feel the weight of every failure and every loss like it is happening again. Still nights when I sit in the dark and realize nobody would know if I broke, because nobody ever knew how close I've been to breaking all along. And the only reason I don't is because I made a vow a long time ago without words. A vow carved into my bones by hunger and humiliation and abandonment. A vow that says I will not give the pain the luxury of watching me surrender. And I know that vow looks like pride from the outside, but from the inside, it feels like a chain I clasped around my own throat, because I didn't trust anything softer to hold me in place. And the older I get, the more I understand that I didn't just survive the wars and the hunger and the betrayals. I survived myself. Survived the ugly thoughts that come when a man is tired and alone and has seen what people are capable of. Survived the temptation to become cruel just because cruelty is easy when you're exhausted. Survived the temptation to let the world make me simple, because simple men are easy to use and easy to predict. And the world loves a man it can predict. I became predictable in the ways that kept me alive. I always showed up, always swallowed what I felt, always carried what was handed to me, always stood in the place where someone needed a body to stand. And the world rewarded that predictability with more weight, more silence, more expectation. And when I started to slow down, when the years finally pressed their thumb into my joints and said, enough, that's when the world's eyes moved past me like I was already gone. That is the coldest lesson of being the dependable man. You are most visible when you are most useful. And invisibility starts the moment you need anything back. I don't hate people for it. Not in the simple way. Because most people don't even know they're doing it. They're just trying to stay comfortable. And comfort makes blind men out of all of us. But I do resent the lie we tell about strength. The lie that strength is always chosen, always noble, always a sign of superiority. Sometimes strength is just what happens when weakness was never allowed. Sometimes strength is a child's reaction to being cornered. Sometimes strength is a man building a roof out of whatever scraps he can find, because the rain is coming whether he's ready or not. I was never allowed the luxury of being fragile. Fragility in my life would have been an invitation for others to take more. And there were always others ready to take more. That's what hunger teaches you too. Not only the hunger in your stomach, but the hunger you see in other people's eyes. The appetite for advantage. The appetite for dominance. The appetite for watching someone else bend. I learned early that there are men who don't feel alive unless they can make another man feel small. and I learned to keep my face empty around them, learned to deny them the pleasure of seeing me flinch. And that denial became a kind of religion, a private code. Do not give them your reaction. Do not give them your tears. Do not give them the satisfaction. It's a strange thing to build your dignity out of withholding, to treat your own emotions like contraband you have to hide. But that's what it was. And now, years later, I can't always tell the difference between dignity and numbness, because I've practiced numbness so long that it wears the mask of discipline. People who haven't lived it think numbness means you don't feel. Numbness is not the absence of feeling. Numbness is feeling too much and locking it behind a door so you can still function. It is a flood held back by bone and willpower. It is a man training himself to breathe shallow so he doesn't touch the bruise under his ribs. And the bruise is always there. It follows you into ordinary moments like a shadow you can't outwalk. I can be eating, washing, walking, and suddenly my mind will drag me back without asking, to a second that smells like smoke and metal and panic, to a face that goes slack, to a sound that wasn't loud but has never stopped echoing, and my hand will tighten around nothing because my body thinks it needs to hold on. That's the part no one sees when they call you fine. That's the part you learn to hide even from yourself. Because if you look at it too long, you start asking questions you can't answer without hating the world. And hating the world is another kind of prison. I try not to hate the world. Hate is heavy. Hate consumes what little energy you have left. But I won't lie and say I don't carry anger. I carry anger the way an old man carries a limp. Quietly, constantly, compensating for it without thinking. Some days the anger is at the men who betrayed me, at the men who used loyalty like a leash, at the men who spoke about honor while sending others to pay the price. Some days the anger is at myself, because I followed when I should have questioned, because I stayed when I should have left, because I let my fear of being abandoned make me accept scraps like they were a feast. Some days the anger is at time itself, because time is the only enemy you can't cut down, the only opponent that never gets tired, never makes mistakes, never bleeds, just keeps coming, taking small pieces until you wake up and realize you don't have your old strength and you don't have your old hope either. And what you have left is a kind of stubborn awareness, like an animal that has been hunted too long and now knows every sound in the dark. That awareness is not peace. It's vigilance. It's the inability to fully rest. It's the mind waking up before your eyes open. It's the heart running drills for disasters that already happened. I've lived so long inside that vigilance that when someone tries to give me calm, I feel like I'm being offered something I don't deserve, or something that will be taken away the moment I accept it. Accepting comfort feels like standing in open ground. It feels like begging to be hit, so I don't accept it. I keep the old posture. I keep my shoulders ready. I keep my voice steady. I keep my grief private, because private grief is safer than shared grief. Shared grief invites opinions. Shared grief invites pity. And pity is a poison to a proud man. Not because pity is always cruel, but because pity reminds you that you have been seen as broken. And once you've been seen as broken, some people start treating you like you are fragile. And that is a kind of disrespect too. Men like me don't want to be handled. We want to be understood, but the world rarely offers understanding. It offers labels. It offers shortcuts. It offers admiration that comes late and shallow. It offers pity that makes you feel smaller. So you choose silence again. You choose the solitude you know. You choose the loneliness that at least doesn't misunderstand you. But loneliness has its own teeth. Loneliness eats your patience. Loneliness makes you sharp. Loneliness makes you forget how to be gentle in the small ways, how to ask someone how they are, and actually want to hear the answer. Loneliness makes you efficient. It makes you transactional. It makes you look at relationships like risk assessments. I hate that I think that way sometimes. Hate how quickly my mind calculates the cost of letting someone close. How it measures their loyalty before it measures their kindness. Because loyalty is what kept me alive more than kindness ever did. Kindness can disappear. Loyalty is rarer. Loyalty is a man staying when it's inconvenient. Loyalty is a man telling the truth when lying would be easier. Loyalty is a man not trading you away for comfort. And I've seen how cheap loyalty can be in the mouths of men who have never had to prove it. They say it like a slogan. They wear it like a badge. But when the moment comes, when the pressure arrives, when the risk becomes real, the badge falls off and you see what's underneath. Fear, selfishness, hunger for approval, hunger for power. I have watched men fold. I have watched men sell each other for a chance to be closer to the fire. I have watched men betray quietly and then sleep. That last part is what still burns me sometimes. Not the betrayal itself, but how easily they lived with it. I envy that ease even as I despise it. I can't live with my own compromises easily. I replay them. I punish myself with them. I hold myself to a standard that nobody else asked me to hold. Because if I don't, then what was the point of all that discipline, all that pain, all that endurance? If I let myself become casual about wrong, then I become one of the men I hated, and I refuse that. I refuse to let the world turn me into the same shape as the people who hurt me. That refusal is a kind of righteousness, but it is also a kind of loneliness, because righteous men are hard to sit with. We carry an invisible ledger. We notice everything. We remember everything. We don't forget debts. And even when we try to forgive, we forgive like men with scars, carefully, distrustfully, always aware of the knife. Forgiveness is not soft for me. Forgiveness is a decision not to waste my remaining years chasing vengeance that won't resurrect anything. It is not a warm release. It is a cold discipline, like setting down a weapon because carrying it is exhausting. I have had revenge in my hands and turned away, and I didn't feel proud. I felt tired, because revenge doesn't give you back what you lost. It just stains you with a new kind of memory. I already have enough memory. I have enough nights that don't let me sleep. I have enough flashes that make my jaw tighten. I don't need more. But even with that, I carry guilt. I carry guilt for the men I couldn't save. I carry guilt for the times I chose my own survival over someone else's. People will say, "You did what you had to do." They say it like it's a clean sentence. It's not clean. Doing what you had to do still leaves a residue. It still leaves a mark on the inside of your eyes. You can't had to do your way out of feeling responsible. You can't logic your way out of regret. Regret lives in the body. It lives in the way you breathe when you remember. It lives in the way your hands shake slightly when you're alone.